Hi, welcome everyone. My name is
Hello.
Marie, and
And my name's Krista.
yeah, and we are gathering with you today to talk about resiliency. It's the first part in a two-part workshop that we put on together with the Mental Health of New Brunswick. So thank you so much for the partnership, and we really hope you enjoy. So welcome to our webinar today. So let's begin with a territorial acknowledgement. So we all gather on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people who shared their land in peace. Peace and friendship treaties with the Mi'kmaq continue to bind us together as we strive for reconciliation. And in our work together today and moving forward, we continue to honor that original promise of ongoing respect, peace, and friendship. And I'd like to mention actually today, as we are recording this webinar, that it's actually a day or two away from Indigenous Peoples Day. So just a little shout out and acknowledgement of what an important and peaceful, mandatory, lovely celebration that is. So as we kind of gather and get started here together, I know that I've just had a busy day that has led me to this space and this office place right now. And so sometimes it takes a minute to kind of transition into webinar mode, like a peaceful place to take in information and to process and to think. So we're going to just start with a gratitude grounding practice, a transitional gratitude grounding practice. So think of something that you feel grateful for today. And so this is meant to kind of ease us out of the chaos and slide into the work that we're going to do together right now. So think of something that you feel grateful for today. And there are some ideas here, some suggestions in case you're trapped and you can't think of one right away. So maybe something kind that someone else did for you, a person in your life that you appreciate, an activity or a hobby that you're grateful to be able to do, to celebrate your ability that way. This is a good one, a positive quality of someone who you sometimes struggle with. So sometimes there are people in our life that we find challenging for whatever reason, and yet it's still important to ground that relationship with the idea that they do have positive qualities to share with you. Maybe a skill or an ability that you have, or a part of your body that you're grateful for and why. And maybe just an item that you love, something that made you laugh, or what you've learned from something that was really hard. So sometimes life, we're going to talk about that today, throws us challenges. And instead of getting stuck in the negativity, we can pull lessons from them. So a lesson that you learned from something that was hard.
Yeah,
Does anything come to mind, Krista, for you?
Yeah, I found that the last one there, that was a way for me to self-reflect over the last couple of months, is because I mean it's so easy to see a lot of the negative things that have come our way, but it's often important in a negative situation to reflect on it and say what did I learn from this situation, right? That can sometimes help put that situation into perspective and seeing it from maybe a more positive angle instead of always focusing on the negative, which I find we can do very easily if we're not mindful of being grateful and appreciative of the good things that also happen in our lives. And that includes the lessons that we learn, right?
Great. So right now, my gratitude is sharing this space with you, Krista, and anybody who's out there watching and listening and taking things in and figuring out the information that we're going to share with you. So I'm just grateful to share this space and these thoughts with all of you. Let's get started. So as I said a minute ago, my name's Marie. This is Krista, my lovely partner. We together run Iris Community Counseling, and we are based in Sac, New Brunswick in the Tantramar area. So we're doing this in partnership today with the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick, and it's a two-part workshop. So if you like this one, feel free to check out our second one. So this one is about resiliency in youth and children, and the second one is about growth mindset for children and youth. So they really tie nicely together. There's a lot of like positive supportive overlap, but also they're both separately lovely in their own way and important to consider. But yeah, so if you're interested in this one, please check out our growth mindset one that follows. So who are we? So Krista and I are both mothers. We are both educators. We're school counselors, and we are also counseling therapists. So we first met and a long time ago, yeah, like maybe 15 years, I don't know, a long time ago, yeah. Side by side, teaching in a middle school. It was my first official job in New Brunswick. It was very exciting. Krista was like a big helper neighbor beside me, wonderful teacher. So we started off teaching, and teaching's exhausting and amazing and all of that stuff. But we realized as educators that maybe eventually we were not maybe focusing on the curriculum, let's be honest, Krista, as much as we were focusing on like their well-being and the mental health and all of that, those relationships that we had with our students. So kind of at different times, but we both made our way back to school to become counseling therapists, and transitioned back into the schools, but this time not as classroom teachers, but as guidance counselors, as school counselors. We both counsel in the Moncton kind of Riverview area of New Brunswick, but our hearts have always stayed in the Tantramar area. I grew up in Sackville. I have like a long, lovely relationship with the town. Krista chose to live here and bring her family here and raise her kids here. We have a really lovely appreciation for the community. So our hearts have always wanted to stay here and counsel and work with the community here. So we started up Iris, been a little over 2 years ago now, and we started, our focus was on helping children and youth. Just because of our backgrounds in education, we knew that that was an area that needed a little bit of extra support. So we've been super busy ever since, and we've built lots of great community partnerships and so many awesome neighboring groups and supports and systems. We really had such a awesome first 2 years, but there's a lot of work to do. So we figured one way to do work would be to partner with CMHA&B and run a couple of webinars for you. Did I miss anything, Krista? I feel like I'm just
no. I thought I'd mention too. What's neat about how we connected was that you're right. We were literally neighbors in classrooms, side by side classrooms. 15 years ago or something like that. And then we kind of each went our own way, didn't we, for a number of years. And then interestingly enough, you had finished your master's in counseling psychology, and I was finishing up mine, and we actually became neighbors again, side by side classroom.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
So thank you, universe.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that. So that was kind of neat how, you're right, how the universe worked to bring us back together, and here we are. And you're right, it's been over 2 years now. So yeah, yes.
Oh, that's like a lovely kind of bookend to it.
Yeah.
Or middle end, because I'm sure we're not done yet.
No, that's right, yeah.
The other thing to share, and I thought of this after, was the name. So Iris Community Counseling, why is that important to us? So in the Tantramar area, I don't know if you're familiar, everybody, with like the gorgeous Tantramar wetlands that are nearby to us. And I say gorgeous from a very personal angle, but really they can be seen as kind of like rugged land and the marsh, right? We live on wetlands, which I love and appreciate, but maybe it is not always an automatic beauty. But from that marshland in the springtime grow these gorgeous wild irises, these like bright purple, fantastic explosions of color that just kind of burst on their own from that rugged landscape. And so when we were thinking of names, we thought Iris was a lovely symbolic name to choose because it grounds us and roots us to our community, and because it's sort of like a symbol of what can happen when you support one another in community and you support mental health, like the blossoming and flowering and the beauty that can come from that. So yeah, that's where the name's from.
You always say that piece best, Marie.
My daughter's middle name, yeah. No bias. All right. Okay, so resiliency. Let's get to it, Krista. This is what we're talking about today. So what is resiliency? And that's kind of like a hot term in mental health these days. You hear resiliency a lot. It's thrown around in lots of different ways, but we really wanted to talk about what it actually means. So go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't, I mean, the word resilient, what does it mean to be resilient? And especially where this webinar is geared towards youth and helping youth to be more resilient and practice ways to be more resilient. You know, what does resiliency mean? It's a big word, and there's nothing to kind of pick apart from it to say, well, it means, you know, to rely, or what, do you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to pick apart. So what resiliency really is, it is, well, the Oxford definition is the ability to withstand or recover quickly from a difficult situation. And if we think about that, and we think about life, and we think about ourselves, we all, you know, experience difficult situations from time to time, regardless of where you come from or anything like that, how you were raised, whatever. We all experience difficult situations. So how do you deal with that, and how do you keep going? And so what we're going to talk about today are recognizing, first of all, defining what resiliency is and what that means to us, and then practicing ways to help to hone that skill of resiliency.
Yeah, to foster resiliency in each other and in ourselves. Sometimes when you hear the idea of resiliency, and I used to frame it in the school system this way, within the narrative of bouncing back. So it's that idea of like recovery and continuation. The piece that's tricky about bouncing back when you think about resiliency too is that idea that there is a solid ground to bounce back to, right? And so when we talk about resiliency in general, it's really important to acknowledge that not everybody is born and given that automatic ability to bounce back. So that's why resiliency is really like a skill that we work on over time throughout our lives to be able to really support ourselves in our mental health as we go through life's challenges.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that brings me to this. So why is resiliency important to children and youth specifically? So people are arguably not born with inherent resiliency, but it's largely a skill that you learn over time. So it's a skill that you have to foster and encourage and support and celebrate. So childhood provides an opportunity to build a strong framework of experiences, perspective, and support that cooperatively form resiliency. The sooner in life you're able to practice resiliency, the longer reaching its impact will have on your overall life and also your ability to cope with adversity. So the reason really that we want to really hone in and focus on resiliency within the framework of children and with youth is because it's a lifelong challenge. It's a lifelong adventure. And so the earlier we start to celebrate and acknowledge the importance of resiliency, then it becomes sort of like an outlook that the child or the youth will have through the rest of their life, right? So if they celebrate it early on, then they foster it and support it throughout their whole life.
And what a beautiful life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so if you are a child watching this, I hope you can pull that importance. If you're an adult watching this too, this is an ongoing struggle for all of us, right? So we can all find positive impacts about talking about resiliency, right? It's something that we all work and strive toward. Yeah. So a really nice visual, and I'm a visual learner, I need those visual aids to help me understand concepts, but a really nice visual would be like a balance beam, like a seesaw, a balance scale. So, and it's generally the idea that the balance would have negative outcomes and positive outcomes. And in order to be resilient, you really want to stack your positive outcomes full so they can counterbalance the negative outcomes. And that is actually really empowering when you think about it, because no matter how many negative factors you have in your life, you still always have the ability to bump them back up by overlaying positives on them. So protective experiences, social supports, and coping skills on one side. And then on the other side, you have significant adversity on the other. When we talk about that as counselors, we often talk about the ACE score. So ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience Score. And it's just a score that we can self-assess or we can give to one another. And it's just kind of really like a tally about all the sort of challenges and negative kind of tricky pieces that we have within our lives, right? And so often childhood experience can connect with our long-term success when we think of mental health and well-being. So it's important to acknowledge, yes, I've got struggles, like maybe there's been abuse or neglect, or maybe like challenging family dynamics. There's a whole lot of different things that can count for a low ACE score, but we still always have that ability to bump it back up with the positive outcomes.
Bullying is another one that is on the ACE, yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, it's massive. So resilience is evident when a child's health and development tips towards positive outcomes, even when a heavy load of factors is stacked on the negative outcome side. And I think this plays into with that idea of like bounce back. Why can't you just bounce back? Well, we have to acknowledge that bouncing back might be really difficult if our lives are full of negative, like really challenging pieces, right? But that still means that once we acknowledge that and work through that, we still have the ability to outweigh them with positive outcomes.
That's right.
Yeah, not to minimize how hard that is though.
And I just want to make one mention about that too, Marie. That's, speaking about difficult situations and whatnot, it's not always about experiences that you yourself are struggling with, like internally. On the ACE score, it's also, on the ACE questionnaire also mentions, living alongside someone who has mental health issues or, something like that. So it's sometimes it's in your environment is also what can be considered a difficult situation, not just struggles you're having inside you, if that makes sense.
It does, and it makes sense when you think of like intergenerationality, anything like that, for sure, Krista. Good point. So resiliency, I can read it for you. It's the ability to bounce back, but we just talked a bit about that. So is it really the ability to bounce back? From stress, adversity, failure, challenges, or even trauma. So keep in mind that the notion that we each have a sense of regulated, reliable, controlled, and calm peace to bounce back to is really challenging, which is why we kind of almost need to put an extra focus on cultivating and encouraging resiliency in our youth and children and in ourselves. So think of the impact that you, if you're an adult, can have if you model that to your children as well, right? To the youth and children in your life. It's not something that kids either have or don't have, but it's a skill that kids develop as they grow. So you're not born automatically resilient. You're born, all of us, automatically with the ability to become resilient. So resilient are more likely to take healthy risks because they don't fear falling short of expectations. Anything to add, Krista?
Nope. Yeah, I think you summed it up good.
So this thought, every time I think about it, it just kind of like I just want to take a deep breath because I feel the responsibility of it, and I also feel the exciting kind of power of it. So consider the following, and I think about this too as I do work in the schools as well. So resiliency is the result of the combination of protective factors. The single most common factor for children who develop resiliency is to have at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, a caregiver, or another adult. So when we think of children and youth as they age and their life's adventures, the single most determining factor of whether or not they will have like positive resiliency mental health is that they have a connection to one adult in their lives, one positive connection with an adult. And so it doesn't have to be a caregiver, it doesn't have to be a guardian, it doesn't have to be a parent, just another adult. It could be your librarian, it could be a really kind neighbor nearby, it could be the custodian at your school. I mean, it could be any adult who has that powerful impact or impactful relationship that can lead to having a resilient outlook.
That's right. And just to clarify too, like what is a protective factor? There are many of them, but a couple of examples would be things like, you know, when faced with a difficult situation, how is your social support, for example? You know, where would you rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being great social support, 0 being I don't have anybody. Another one would be physical health, right, Marie? Sleep, I think, is another one. So it's those sorts of things that you, what can you do in your life? Again, it's kind of cool because you do have control over a lot of them and how well you, I guess, what's the word, practice having those protective factors in your life and being mindful of them. But you're absolutely right. That one really stands out about the supportive, having a supportive adult. And to your point, it can be the bus driver, it could be a custodian at the school, like it doesn't matter. The cool thing, my daughter in her elementary years, you know, you'd think it'd be the teacher, for example, that she connected with 2 adults. One was the lunch lady and one was the secretary of the school. How amazing is that? And she literally went and talked to the secretary. She went and talked to about certain issues that she was, you know, struggling with or whatever, because she felt loved, supported, and cared for whenever she went to her. So, and the lunch lady, they just had a really special, which is so cool because it's not the who you think, like the coach or the teacher or whatever, right? So I thought that was so neat when she would come home. Anyway, they were the 2 that we bought flowers for at the end of the year for her. That's cool.
Krista, thank you for sharing. Okay, now I'm just focused on how lovely that is.
I know.
Okay, so here's a list of potential ways that you can counterbalance in favor of resiliency. So if you're feeling like, maybe if you're looking at your own scale and you're feeling really weighed down in a negative way, here are some things that you can do for yourself, or you can do for the children and youth, or anybody around you, right, to sort of support them and push up that positive. So So facilitating supportive adult-child relationships. So that's what we just talked about, right? So Krista allowed and encouraged her daughter to build those relationships at the school that are maybe not typical, but Krista recognized that was important. So you celebrate that. So yeah, supportive and celebratory adult-child relationships, building a sense of self-efficacy and perceived control. So allowing yourself and your children and youth to feel like, although the world is very much guided by adults, they still have some control. They still have some power and equity in all of this. And self-efficacy is the idea that they are enough, right? So that you give them experiences where they start to celebrate and see their strength and give them voice too, for sure. So then the third one would be providing opportunities to strengthen adaptive skills and regulatory capacities. So let them learn to be uncomfortable and let them learn to have to self-regulate through that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let them learn to have to be flexible and have to be fluid and have to be open to change. And those are hard things that we all struggle with, but why not encourage that as soon as possible? And then the fourth one, and Krista, jump in whenever you want to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mobilizing sources of belonging, hope, and then cultural traditions. And so that's just the idea of really like encouraging community, encouraging connection, encouraging belonging, right? And that can look different depending on any family's culture, any family's traditions, any family's sort of worldview. As long as there's a sense of belonging and hope and tradition and like sort of community grounding, it's a lovely thing.
And if oh, I can't talk today. If support, like facilitating those supportive adult relationships, sometimes we have to get creative too, because let's be real, sometimes our kids don't connect with the adults in a school building or what have you for whatever reason, and that happens. Or maybe they're not part of a school team or you know, an extracurricular sport or something like that, where there's just seemingly no adults for them to connect with, or maybe you don't live around extended family or whatever. So for example, so with my son, who's a teenager, when he was in middle school, he wasn't a sports guy, and so I'd asked him, what is your interests? Well, it came out that he loved cooking, so I had to get creative, and I ended up finding him like sort of one-on-one cooking lessons with someone, and the relationship that he built with that woman was unbelievable. So, and it really helped build his confidence. And I mean, just so I guess my point is just sometimes we need to get creative with finding those supportive adult relationships with our kids, people they can trust and that we trust, and really harness that for them. That
brings up to me to the idea, Krista, of not feeling threatened by those relationships as well. Like I know as a parent or as a guardian, sometimes it's, oh, but that's my role. But we can share those roles, right? I think of the relationship that my daughter has with her dance teacher, for example, right? She can teach her things and kind of support lessons that I'm teaching as well in a different way. And sometimes it's really nice to hear those lessons in a different voice, from a different perspective. And so no way does that feel like an intrusion to me. It just feels like a partnership that can help me to raise. Like the cheesy, it takes a village. It definitely takes a village to build resiliency.
You're right about that. And I love that you mentioned that too, because it is true. Sometimes we do get kind of like, well, isn't that my role? I mean, shouldn't I teach my son how to cook? But no, that was a perfect opportunity for fostering that kind of relationship, right? Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And this is where I wish that people could shout out and give us some input as well. But we should say that now too. If you have any questions, feel free. I think at the end we'll put up an email, so feel free to reach out if there's anything you wanted to share or if you have questions for us. We would love, although we can't have the conversation now, we can continue the conversation when the webinar is done.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing our screen now so that we can play you a YouTube video. So I will try to be techie and see if I can stop sharing, and just be patient and we will get a YouTube video. So this is just a brief introduction of kind of what is resiliency. And it's nice because it's not us babbling away, it's other experts.
Why do some people do well despite serious hardships? The science of resilience can help us find answers.
We define resilience as a good outcome in the face of adversity. The extent to which we can build capacities in all children early in their lives to be able to deal with whatever bumps in the road or major obstacles may be coming down the track, that's an investment in building strong human capital and healthy, productive adults.
Some children face more obstacles and adversity than others.
Like having a parent with a major mental illness, growing up in a very socioeconomically disadvantaged community, going to schools that are not good, being exposed to violence in the neighborhood or in the home.
But some children do well despite these significant obstacles.
Resilience is that ability or set of capacities for positive adaptation, allowing you to keep in balance.
We're talking about the kinds of capacities and skills and the abilities that give people a sense of mastery and management of difficulty.
It's tempting to think about children as either having this resilient quality or not. But resilience is built over time, just as and in parallel with how the architecture of the brain is built over time.
It's not just in the person. It's in the interaction between the person and the environment.
So we care about resilience for the same reason that we care about promoting healthy development, because in many respects it is the same. We are interested in promoting resilience in children so that, despite the odds, more and more children can grow up to be productive citizens.
Hi, Krista.
Hey.
All right, we did it. Video success. So I hope it was nice to hear from other people about the impact and the importance of resiliency.
Yeah.
And so our next slide would be talking about resiliency. And we're just kind of curious, now that you know a little bit more about it and you kind of thought about why we're talking about it, why it's important. We're just curious if you can think on your own, and I know we can't share back to back, but still it's nice to marinate and reflect. What situations have you found difficult in your life?
Yeah.
Or maybe you've had to use a little resiliency to get through them.
And really, I mean, if we think even in our current situation with the pandemic, you know, maybe that's where you're going to, is what situations have you found over the last 2 or 3 months to have been difficult? You know, is it financial aspects? Is it relationship aspects, uncertainty of the future and what that holds and what that looks like? Is it upset to your schedule and routine that has, you know, left you feeling less resilient, I guess, and you know, maybe needing ways to kind of cope with that and sit with those emotions and how that feels? So those are just some examples, but I mean, certainly we can go back to childhood as well. And so there's all kinds of things in our life that we could really pick apart and say, well, what situations have we found difficult? I'm sure there's a few that stand out to you more than others.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important too to take that time every now and again as just a mental health practice to look back on your life and wonder, what were the moments that were resilient, and then intentionally celebrate, you know, what were the moments where you had to practice resiliency, and then celebrate your ability to do so, because we all have struggles, we all have challenges, and it's really, really important to celebrate the ways that we've learned to overcome and work through them.
And in that self-reflection, another thing that might be helpful too is you've to be here today, you've obviously come out of those situations, right? Maybe wounded, maybe, or with scars, but what did you do to help yourself get out of that situation? Those are probably practices of resiliency that you may not even be aware of. And I think when we go through the list, we have it's not exhaustive by any stretch, but we have some, I think it's 10, isn't it, Marie? 10 things that we share to help you practice ways to be more resilient. I mean, you may even find when we go through that list that, you know, there's a lot of those things that you are already doing. So pat yourself on the back for sure.
For sure. Resiliency is one of those things when you start to define it and really figure out how it connects to your life, you realize almost inevitably that you have strengths as far as resiliency that you maybe were not even aware of beforehand. So in a way, if you pull nothing from this conversation that we're having together today, if you just pull from that the idea that you do have resilient qualities and you have practiced resiliency before and you're therefore capable of continuing, that is a lovely thing. So what are some ways that you're resilient? So we have some tips, like Krista was just talking about, ways to kind of practice resiliency.
So the first one is taking risks. So that, you know, within reason, of course, but what that means is stepping outside your comfort zone every now and then, not so much so that you're full on exposing, you know, yourself to something that you're really uncomfortable doing or something like that. But for example, let's say you have a real social anxiety. You really feel uncomfortable in social situations. So taking a risk might be, I'm going to challenge myself today to call a restaurant and ask what their special of the day is, or something like that. So it's stepping outside that comfort zone, but it certainly isn't so much exposure that you're going to end up feeling completely, you know, ridden with panic and never to do that again. So not to be afraid to take risks. That will help build your resiliency, absolutely. Number two, Marie, did you want to add to that at all?
The only thing I'd like to add to the first one is the idea that to me also highlights why it's important to talk about resiliency and to practice resiliency in children and youth, because arguably we learn what is a safe risk and what's an unsafe risk by practice, right? And so the earlier we can start taking those risks, those literal baby steps when we think of children, the better. Then we start to navigate what's a safe risk for us, what's a healthy risk.
Right. And if we think of, you know, youth and think of ways of how to help them practice resiliency and how to be more resilient, number two is learning to solve your own problems. I mean, absolutely, there will be times in our lives, even as adults, there are times in our lives where we need to go to other people to ask for help and to help solve an issue that we're struggling with. But there are times where you can, and I completely encourage you to empower yourself to learn to solve your own problems. So what that might look like would be maybe on the school playground. Let's say you're having an argument with a friend, and sometimes that argument really should be dealt with just between you and that friend. But when you I'm so mad and you post something on social media and then other people get involved and the problem all of a sudden escalates to something much more bigger than it needed to be, and a lot of hurtful things are said, and potentially a friendship is destroyed, you know. So that's an example where you might want to take that on and just have that deal just with that person and that person alone, rather than taking it to the next step and escalating the issue. Yeah.
Perfect.
So number three, being open to trying new things or going to new places or meeting new people. So, you know, I think of things like when we do these self-reflections that Marie and I are kind of like encouraging you to do, is just check in with yourself. You know, get to know yourself a little bit, especially as you get older. Your interests and hobbies and things, your passions, all those things are going to change as you learn more about your world that you live in, right? So what are those? And be open to trying new things. You know, when I told you earlier about my son looking into cooking lessons for him, I mean, yeah, he was nervous for sure, but I'm glad that he did it, because it was a resiliency practice, because he ended up boosting his self-esteem and feeling confident in the kitchen to bake something or cook something. And so not to be afraid to try those things, you know, and to make mistakes, which we'll learn more about in our next session.
Yeah, and not to be afraid to fail at those things either, right? And that's where we'll talk about growth mindset too, but
exactly.
That's okay, we all fail. That's a funny word in the first place, failure, right? Oh, go ahead, Krista.
No, go ahead, Marie, because I was going to go on to number 4. So what were you going to say for number 3?
I was just going to hop to 4. Yeah, manage your own emotions.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because I find even as an adult that can be a tough one to do, to manage your own emotions. But you know what's cool about if you're youth watching these webinars is that you're learning hopefully some takeaways. And if you can learn now at a young age how to, well, what will help me manage my own emotions, and what that looks like could be different ways of handling it depending on the emotion itself. So for example, me, running helps me, if I go for a run or a brisk walk, that helps me manage my emotions of anger or frustration or irritability or something like that. Whereas if I'm sad, sometimes a more quiet walk in nature or in the woods, or maybe just being by myself in my room, listening to music, looking at pictures, something like that would be a coping strategy that helps me manage my own emotions. So it's important that you really get to know yourself so that you know what works for you. Mm-hmm. And to add to that, where are you? This is the other thing, is you want to be able to have lots of tools and techniques and strategies, because for example, when I'm at work and I get angry at something, I can't be like, oh, I'm out of here, I'm going to go for a half an hour run. I don't have that freedom to do that, right? So like yourself, when you're in a classroom and let's say someone's pestering you in the class and getting you really upset, well, maybe listening to some really hardcore loud music is your way of dealing with your angry feelings, but let's be real, that's not going to work in the classroom setting. So maybe for you, it's, in that situation, I know that I need to leave the situation. I need to go for a walk through the halls, get a drink of water, whatever I need to do, and collect myself, come back, you know, or maybe it's mentioning to the teacher I need to have another seat in the class that I need to go to be able to get away from that person that's bothering me. So these are all different things. I know it's a lot to think about, but it's important that we do put some thought to it so that you can help build that resiliency, that life skill, through learning to manage your own emotions. It will help you immensely through many things in life.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Krista. And I just wanted to add to that too. Right now, like, we're all going through a pandemic together, right? We're all living through a stage of kind of communal crisis. And so what happens with that, even if we're not aware of it, we're under a lot more stress than what we're typically used to. And so what happens, it's called our window of tolerance. So it's our ability to kind of regulate our emotions is smaller and smaller and smaller. So our window of tolerance is really shortened right now because we're all under a lot of pressure and stress that we're not typically used to. So the ability to kind of manage your emotions right now is challenging, but also more important than ever. And so I know that I'm not alone, so I will speak this openly. I'm not alone. I'm quick to cry these days. I'm quick to be angry. I'm quick to laugh hysterically. Like, my ability to regulate my emotions isn't as great as it used to be because I'm under pressure and a million other things that life throws our way, right? Life doesn't stop due to the pandemic. So just be super aware of that. If you're catching yourself a little more weepy than normal, that is like your window of tolerance really, really shortened. So now more than ever is a really great opportunity to first be aware that maybe you're struggling with emotional resiliency. And then secondly, like Krista was talking about, coming up with some tools, some strategies, some practices that will allow you to kind of harness your own emotional resilience. Because if you can cope during a COVID pandemic, then you can cope, right? This is your chance to prove yourself that you're resilient.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Krista.
So number 5, asking lots of questions. I think sometimes we get afraid to ask questions for fear. I know certainly with my own kids, there's that fear, that stigma that people will think I'm stupid, or you get hypersensitive and you read into other kids' reactions and think that person just rolled their eyes at me, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But really, it is some of the smartest people in the world, the Albert Einsteins, if you will, that have asked lots of questions. Be curious, really feed your mind. And the only way to get those answers is to ask those questions. So don't be afraid to do that.
What I always tell students in the classroom too, like, if you ask that question, chances are there's like at least one other person in the room who had that same question as you.
Definitely.
You were just the one who was brave enough to venture out there and put yourself in a place of vulnerability by asking it. So way to go. Good job.
That's right. And then number 6, as I said, we'll be talking a little bit more about that in our growth mindset session, but that's about making mistakes and being okay with it. I mean, if we try to live up to perfection, it's going to be a long, tough road ahead, because really trying to be perfect is just, it's unachievable, you know? And there's something really beautiful about imperfection. And I think when we honor that, and we honor and see the beauty in both our strengths and our, I won't say weaknesses, but our areas of needs improvement, you know, there's room for growth when we keep our minds open to that, rather than seeing it as a terrible thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So 7 is to create a positive self-view, and Krista's touched on this a little bit already, but to kind of get to know yourself, and then to love yourself, to have self-confidence and self-esteem, and to self-advocate, to be aware of, you know, who you are as a person and why that person is worth celebrating.
Yep.
So 8 is to set and work towards your goals. And so when we think of goals, sometimes we think massive goals, but really there's sort of short-term goals and then long-term goals. And it's all variable on what's going on in your life. So a goal for the pandemic could even be like, get out of bed today, right? And that's okay, even if your goals are shortened like that. Maybe your goal could be to finish high school. Maybe your goal could be to finish an assignment, right? So you have to think about perspective. You have to think about setting realistic, reasonable goals that you can meet and find success with in a timely manner. We could talk SMART goals with you, but we won't go there right now. But yeah, it's always important to have some sort of motivation, some sort of drive to think, and this includes hope, right? Goals are really, really directly tied to hope. So if you can weave hope and determination and commitment into your day, into your life, then that will immediately foster resiliency.
Definitely.
Oh, there we go. Be hopeful. Go ahead, Krista.
Definitely be hopeful, because without hope, what do we have, right? We have to have some small inkling of hope in order to be, I believe anyway, to be able to continue to press on and move forward, right? And lastly, number 10, and I think perhaps arguably one of the most important, is to care about yourself. We are so quick to get down on ourselves and point out our, you know, failures and our imperfections and, you know, what we did wrong or what we said or regrets or anything negative like that. But wow, if we do nothing but harness negative energy and envelop that around us, then that's what we're going to live. We need to learn to channel positive energy, and part of channeling positive energy is getting to know who you are as a person and acknowledging it and accepting it and being accepting.
Mm-hmm. And to train yourself to love yourself, right? You make your own thought patterns, and if you are stuck in negative thought patterns about yourself, then that's where you're going to be stuck. If you even just start planting small seeds of, oh, I can do that, I got this, then
That's
they
right.
grow and grow and grow. You're really training your brain to start celebrating.
Well, and I'm excited about our next session too, because we really talk about that with our word yet.
Yeah.
We won't say anything. We'll leave you hanging in suspense, but
the dangling golden carrot of yet.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, cheesy counselors, I love it. So here's another little video. It talks a lot about like tips and strategies of how to foster resiliency in youth and children and adults. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll pop up the video. So enjoy.
Resilience is not some magical quality. It's something that really can be built, even in difficult circumstances.
The key active core ingredient to building resilience are the relationships kids have to others who care about them.
Of course, families play a very important role, but nobody raises children in isolation. We have a huge amount of research to show the powerful impacts of teachers, coaches, other adults in the community with whom children have a chance to develop relationships, who play that critical supportive role of building resilience. As a result of responsive interaction, children build simple skills of coping and adapting. How to stop crying, how to regulate your behavior, being able to defer gratification.
You have an adaptive toolkit that allows you at moments of stress or challenge to bring out a number of potential skills that allow you to get through it.
As children get older, the sophistication of those skills increases. Being able to monitor situations, solve problems. The way we as a society can nurture the development of resilience is to help communities to pay more attention to building the capabilities of the adults who care for children and provide the supports they need to tip the scales toward more positive life outcomes.
And then when communities say, we want to be an active part of crafting the solution, to really understand what's necessary to produce the resilience, that's when the ball gets rolling.
Resilience building, capacity building, is really in everyone's interest, and everyone reaps the benefits when we do that well.
Okay, so as we work towards the end of our webinar, it's important to reflect on what we've been talking about as far as resiliency. So we have a few kind of guiding questions to help you through that and to help us through this, because as we said, resiliency is an ongoing thing. And so every time that we talk about resiliency, I find I learn more and interact with the idea differently. So I appreciate this too. So what is one thing that you learned from what we shared with you today? So it's one thing, honestly, one thing. You know, typically when we go to presentations and workshops and all of that, our brains really only hold one piece of information. So find that one and grab on tight. And then from that, what is one action item that you'll take? So now that you know that one thing, or now that you've thought about resiliency, you got to do something, right? Right? When you know better, you do better. So this is the do part. What are you going to do with that information? And then maybe this connects to that. So who is one person that you're going to talk to about resiliency in youth and children? So maybe it's a friend or a partner. Maybe it's a child that you know, or an adult that you know, a neighbor, a teacher. Who do you think could benefit from hearing about resiliency in youth and children? And then lastly, how will you strengthen and model your own resiliency? So whether you are a child or a student watching this, or whether you're an adult, a parent, and anything at all, how are you going to strengthen and model your resilience? So questions. So as we shared, you're welcome to email us. So, and I don't have it up on the screen, but I think we can share ours. So we're both Marie and then Krista at iriscounseling.ca. That would be the best way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, you can also visit our website too at iriscounseling.ca, and counseling is with 2 L's. And then there will definitely be an email contact for us as well if you have any questions, and we completely encourage you to do that, and we will get back to you, you know, as soon as we can with those.
Yeah. And feel free to reach out to CMHA and B as well and share your thoughts or questions with them too. It is a true partnership that way. So you know how we started by transitioning in? Well, we're about to finish this, which means I'm back to my 3-kid, 2-dog chaos. It's been a lovely little reprieve from that. And it's a sunny Friday, and the weekend's about to launch, so this is going to be good for me. So sit back. So, and simple transition to do with anybody, so yourself, kids, anyone you know, would be to ground yourself back in the space. So now we've kind of been in our head, so it's important to ground ourselves back in this space, the environment around us as we launch into our day. So look around, whether it's your office, I almost said the car you're in, but I hope you're not driving. So wherever you are, look around your space and see if you can find, oh gosh, something that is red. So look around and find something red. And the trick is to find something that maybe you've never noticed before. Because even in spaces that you yourself have cultivated, you'll always find surprises. So find something red.
The red light I just drove through. Okay, I'll stop. I'm stopping.
My red cheeks. Okay. Find something orange. Oh my gosh, the orange cone on the highway. Okay, yellow. Blue, violet, and then I like the last one, surprising. So like not a color, but just something that you're like, what is that? Like a surprise that you weren't expecting. So, and that activity kind of gets you out of that like space where you're thinking about thoughts and ideas and all that theoretical piece. It gets you back grounded mindfully in the kind of present world around you. So simple practice. You could do it for an hour if you wanted to, or you could do it for like 1 minute. In my family, we often go on, like, we call them rainbow mindfulness walks. So it's the same sort of thing, but we try to go through the colors and see what we can find. And it leads to some really fun discussion. So thanks so much, merci you all, and thanks so much for spending some time with us and thinking about resiliency. And thanks also for cultivating resiliency, right? Like the example that you're going to set for yourself and others is huge.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, taking the time to watch our webinar, and hopefully that it was worth your time and you were able to take, like Marie said, at least one thing away with you.
Sounds good. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks so much. So the second one should be up too. So our second workshop, it's a two-parter. So this was resiliency and the next one is growth mindset. So if you're at all interested in continuing, there's a really exciting one coming up soon. So look out for that.
Thanks, everyone.